Hi, I'm Lauren Kemp,
And I'm Bridget Price.
and this is Entrepreneurs in Progress. So we're back expanding on our discussion around money and finances. In the previous episode, we went through a very quick crash course on business finances, breaking down some commonly used terminology. So for this episode, we're going to be chatting more in detail about where the money resides, how we're working through perceptions of money, and the art of transparency. So let's get started. So Bridget, where does your money actually go?
Not to me. No. No.
Oh, we starting out like that. All right.
I know, right? Like, let's keep it real. Yeah, it is kind of coming to us, but not really. It's now starting to trickle in. But we have quite a bit of expenses to keep operations going. So I would say our primary source of, kind of outpouring where our money goes is through keeping the business running and functioning. So operating costs, that includes salaries, that includes rainy day funds, like if we have to refund a customer, that type of thing. We invest a lot in software, so we have those expenses. Man, I didn't realize how much it costs to complete a transaction. So we have a chunk going through credit card transactions. We have insurance on our cleaning teams, workers' comp, and liability insurance, which is a lot of money because they actually will, front you at first and say, okay, like this is the estimate. And then they come back and review your numbers and they basically audit you from the following year.
Okay.
And then they increase the premium. And that was a shock.
Oh,
Yeah. And usually like those insurance companies, they require like a third down up front. So like that's a huge chunk that you have to pay. And then they split it up over the rest of the year. So a lot of our expenses really just goes towards making sure we can operate and secure the business. So it's a lot more than I want to pay out, but we're trying to figure out how to scale and cut back on those costs.
yeah, absolutely. I was surprised at some of the costs, like I never thought about like needing workers' comp insurance or general liability insurance. The credit card transaction fees is a big one too. To me, 2.5% or 3%, like seems like a small number. And then when you actually add it up and the amount of transactions and the amount of money you bring in, like that is our third largest expense at the end of the year.
Right.
Is credit card transaction fees. Our number one is like our employee's salary, and then number two is health insurance, and then number three is credit card transactions. And it's kind of crazy to think like how high that one actually is up there on the list, because it seems so small when you're, at least to me, like someone who's not really financially savvy. So I was like,
in your mind, you think you're going to make that $1 million the following day.
Yeah.
So you're like, whatever, 2%. And then you quickly learn about all the other expenses and you're like, holy crap, like that 2% I could be taking home, or, you're always trying to justify what expense could be yours.
Yeah.
Your money in your pockets. But yeah, it adds up pretty quickly.
Especially when you have smaller, transactions, it just seems like such a small amount of money at the time. The smaller your transactions are,
right,
the less you really notice it until it's like the end of the year and you see the grand total. So I thought that was interesting. Oh, legal. I don't know if you guys have had to pay any, we had to pay for legal services, like LegalZoom to set up our LLC. We were lucky enough to get a free hour of legal advice from a friend. So
yeah, we have a monthly subscription to a LegalZoom where we kind of have an attorney on standby if we need anything. Last year with the pandemic, we primarily worked with contractors, and we had a lot of contractors, or quite a few, submitting unemployment claims, which you technically can't do because they're not an employee. Pandemic did expand to where contractors could file for unemployment, but they had to do it under their own self, not through our company. So we definitely got the attorney on the phone pretty quickly there and figured out are we liable for unemployment tax in this situation, and that type of thing. But yeah, we've had a couple of other legal issues, so we pay towards that as well. We try to do everything we can, or we try to pay for everything we can where we don't have to run into a significant financial issue. So
yeah. Yeah, definitely. Unemployment taxes. So that's another one that I did not realize that we'd have to pay for because, and also our employees in Texas. So like I had to navigate the Texas Workforce Commission site and, it's tax season now. And I'm like, oh shit, like I got to like file a wage report and do all this for the first time. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. Their goddamn portal, just like crashed and they're like, check back between the hours of 10 p.m. and 8:30 a.m. I was like, what do you mean? Like, need this information from me and your like system can't even support normal business hours? Like, so we taxes, the wage report for unemployment taxes with Texas. We have the estimated tax payments for Arizona. We have the estimated tax payments for federal, like all these things that I had, previously not, thought about either. And if it's like your first or second year in business, you're like, how am I supposed to estimate how much I'm going to make this year? Like, you have no idea. We have a better idea now, I guess, in our second year, but like, you look up online and like all the articles tell you like small businesses should save 30 to 40% of their money for taxes. And I was just like, what? Like,
girl,
that is insane.
It's crazy because
how am I supposed to live?
Right. You're barely scratching the surface, especially in your first year. So you're like, I got to put aside another 30, 40%.
Yeah.
Say what?
Yeah. And then it turns out, it's tax season. I think that, it was like 23% was actually what we needed to save for our taxes for last year. So I was just like, oh, okay, like not as bad as the 30 or 40% that I was expecting. But still, it's just like, damn.
We pay our quarterly taxes. So like Gusto, they file it automatically for us and then we pay it, which has been such a huge time saver. Like we don't have to figure that out. But even doing our taxes this year, man, the crappy thing about being like an LLC is that income looks like it's all yours. So we're like, no, we didn't make that. But, it's like, oh yeah, you did. And now you have to pay all these taxes. And it's like, it's like, okay, I'm going to go crawl under a rock now. I'm waiting to reap the benefits of like those business deductions and stuff. And I guess we're not big enough to do that just yet. But yeah, it's like, man, all of it is initially overwhelming.
Yeah. And eventually you will hit a turning point where you're making so much that this doesn't become as big of an impact or worry.
Sure.
And you finally get past, that, I don't know, there's like that threshold of what you expect like your salary to be. And then you're like, when you've made it essentially like, oh, okay, like money wise we're set.
Yeah. And not only is there a threshold, you do learn, right? So you're like, okay, we're in our second, third year. We're going to put this aside.
Yeah, expectation management too is the big one because, we're talking about all the things that we were surprised about and you don't realize going into it. So the first year is a lot of just like not realizing a lot of these things. Yeah. And then after that, you're like, okay, I know what to expect. I know how to plan for it. And you just accept that it's your life and reality now.
Yeah, you pay a lot of bills, more bills than you ever could imagine or think of. And when you're starting out as an entrepreneur, I think a lot of people try to factor in all of these expenses and like just things just keep coming out of the woodworks that no one ever told you before. So we're learning, we have learned, and it's still, it's a little gut punch sometimes when we see those final numbers.
Yeah. So we've talked a bit about operation expenses, a little bit about HR and legal. Do you and Marcus have like, well, I know the answer to this question. This is like a dumb setup. Yeah. so can you tell me about you and Marcus's marketing and agency expenses?
Yeah. So we do invest in marketing, but we haven't even really put the pedal to the metal in terms of our marketing dollars. So since we're a consumer facing business, we primarily focus on like Google, SEO, and review sites, specifically Yelp. So those are our main advertising platforms. We are on Facebook, but we don't even really post any ads there. We're not on Instagram yet. So we're really just on Google and Yelp. And the initial investment in marketing obviously was so high, right? Because you're new and you're starting out and you're trying to get your business out there, that I, you know, that was one of the initial expenses where I was trying to tell Marcus, I could do that. But then of course you don't have the time. And so you have to evaluate time versus money and all of that and delegating. And so he said, no, we're just going to go ahead and launch into this. And it's crazy because some of these platforms, they obviously have incentives to upsell you and all of this. And that is what initially happened with Yelp. They tried to upsell us into this package that wasn't really a great fit, and it was so expensive, and we felt burned in the end of it because, like, after a month, we didn't see any results, and it was really bad, like, the whole setup. However, you know, Marcus was still kind of optimistic about this and was like, you know, I'm going to give Yelp another chance. And Yelp has been one of our biggest drivers in terms of advertising. And the great thing about this is we only spend $225 a month on Yelp, which is crazy.
$225?
It has, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I mean, I can't even tell you the return. It's crazy that we get on Yelp leads. So for us, that's worth it.
Yeah, I'm shocked. I imagined it would be like thousands of dollars a month.
That's what it was like when we first got. And then, you know, Marcus talked to a friend or another competitor in the space and he gave him some tips. And I mean, we have been able to utilize Yelp like crazy. And the secret to Yelp really is about getting that first review and then building on top of that and making sure your reviews are consistent, strong, you know, because as soon as you dip below 5 stars, like 4, 3.5, it's going to be hard to generate strong leads at that point. So we put a really big focus like on our customer service experience and then making sure we tried to have the quality there with the actual service. So, but yeah, $225. And like, I'm telling you, Lauren, we get tens of thousands of dollars of business in Yelp every month.
Wow.
So we've reached a threshold and we saw like these numbers, someone else shared them, but essentially what you want to do when you grow your business, if possible, is you want to get to a place where you're growing your business, but your like marketing expenses stay stagnant. So like ultimately you're leveraging all the initial upfront costs that you've invested with marketing and it's just continue to, you know, spur all this business growth. And that's kind of where we are right now because again, we've only done Yelp and then we do SEO. SEO is our largest marketing investment right now. We spend almost $2,000 a month on it, but it's super helpful. Again, one of those things I thought I could do on my own. But, you know, SEO is tricky, right? It's understanding keywords, it's understanding, you know, Google's ever changing algorithms, being on top of content, which I just didn't have the time to create content. So we work with an agency called SEO One Click. They're based in California, San Diego, I believe, and they've been really great. Totally recommend them.
Nice.
So yeah, I mean, thankfully, so I would say we spend about $2,000 to $3,000 a month on marketing. I mean, we want to increase that, but again, it's been working so far and we're trying to scale. So we're afraid of like, you know, going too fast, too hard or too soon or going too hard, too fast, too soon. And so, I mean, but yeah, marketing technically still, you know, is a significant portion of our budget considering everything else.
And I found what was interesting, we were talking about this offline, is you said like the SEO, you didn't see results for like 6 months before it started picking up and really paying off. So, I mean, 6 months and you have, let's say $2,000 a month. So you've already invested $12,000 before you've even seen that return yet. I mean, that's got to be difficult to stomach, you know, especially after the Yelp experience and it's just having that faith that it's going to pay off. Like, how did you guys like push through that?
Girl, it was constant. I can do SEO. Like, I can write our blog posts, you know. But yeah, you know, Marcus was just very adamant about this investment. He said, this is what's going to make sure we get to the next level. This is what's going to draw us the best and strongest leads. And he's believed in SEO so much. And I know the power of SEO, right? It's you go to Google, you search, things pop up. We understand that concept. So, but yes, it was hard to stomach that expense. And essentially what we did, right, is like we had the initial roughly $7,000 to $10,000 we invested in the business up front. And then we looked at the monthly expenses and SEO was at that time like the biggest chunk. I mean, we barely had contractors. So that was like almost half of what we are paying out. And so we essentially said, okay, if we can make enough money each month to just cover our contractors and this like marketing expense, we're fine. And that's essentially what we did for those initial 6 months. Like, you know, first month we made $1,300. The following month it was like $3,400. So the first month we lost, right? We were paying out of pocket. Then the next month we're essentially covering it. And the third month we were at like 5,000. So we were slowly but surely chipping away.
Yeah.
And we kind of just stayed the course. But yeah, it was hard, right? Like, again, as an entrepreneur, you put so much work into something, you want to make money immediately. And
and you don't know when to pull the plug. Like, you don't know when to keep going. It's tough to navigate and figure those out. And I think, you know, with agencies too, like you brought up, like, I could do this myself. Like, I could do SEO, I can write blog posts. And I get it that, like, we just don't have the time to do all that. And I used to, like, think agencies were overpriced or overvalued because, like, you know, I had spent a lot of my career doing social media marketing, and then there's a couple times in my life where I've worked at agencies, and I'm like, wow, like, you're charging this much. All they had to do is just like hire somebody full time. Like, it's not like, there's no way this is worth it. But I've come to realize, like, it's like, okay, people don't have the time. If you hire someone full time, there's a lot more added expenses than just salary, obviously. And you're also buying the expertise of the agency. So, you know, people in agencies really pull their knowledge together, and they, like, that's the thing they do. They research that topic. And if they're a good agency, they're always on top of the trends. And so, like, previously I had a kind of a negative view about how agencies were priced. But as I've gotten older and, you know, become a business owner, I've realized I do understand their value more. And it's not as simple as just like, oh, I'm just going to hire a social media marketer and they're going to be able to do, you know, that much more. And I mean, you can't always do that.
No, you can't. And sometimes you're delusional because, again, you don't want to see $1,500, $2,000 come out of your account every month. Like, that is like mortgage. That's multiple bills. I mean, that's so much money. And you're like, I can do everything, right? And you just, again, you become disillusioned. And for us, what it really came down to was us having our budget spreadsheet open. And we saw exactly, like, with both of our incomes, what we were paying towards Made Easy. So we were technically paying to be in business, right? We weren't getting paid from our business just yet. We were paying just to have skin in the game. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs have to come to terms with that, you know, like, how much am I willing to invest, whether it's time, money, resources, whatever, to get this off the ground. And unfortunately, sometimes that can hold a lot of entrepreneurs back. We had a conversation with a couple of entrepreneurs around SEO, and they understood the value, but not to the point to where they're ready to make that investment. And unless you're there, you're always going to question if you should spend X amount of dollars on this service to help propel your business. And it's tough because you don't want to tell anyone what to do with their money. You know, you don't want to tell them how to invest it. That's their hard-earned money. But yeah, if you're not open or, like, again, just willing to kind of put it all on the table, you know, it can be tough in those initial months.
Yeah. And I think what I've noticed too with like you and Marcus and Brian, like, you have a higher tolerance for risking money in general. Does that sound correct?
Yeah, I mean, Marcus more so than me, but I've learned to kind of adapt. Like, I don't want to say it's the whole it takes money to make money type of thing, but it kind of is like that. Yeah. And then it sounds like you don't have that same tolerance.
I don't. At least I feel like it's changing now. I think that I'm starting to see a bit of a shift, but I think that's because, like, we are more stable now. Like, last year, if you had asked me that at this point in time, like, no, I was not, like, you know, I've never been comfortable risking money that I didn't have. Like, I don't like the idea of getting loans or going into debt. I mean, obviously, like, our house is a debt, but, like, you know what I mean? So I'm pretty risk averse in that sense, but I understand and I know that like that's what you got to do as an entrepreneur. Like if you want to grow, like you got to take those risks. And I feel like I see all those stories about like entrepreneurs who were in lots of debt and then they finally were able to turn it around. I mean, I wonder about all the stories where they are in lots of debt and then don't turn it around, which is scary, which is what I didn't want to be. So
yeah, girl, we've been there. Like I said, we've funneled $10,000 in an app before. We've made other investments. They're definitely a blow to the ego sometimes, but I think it's different sometimes when you have a partner or someone you can kind of ride this wave with or roller coaster with and figure something out. I feel like you and I are the ones who try to keep Brian and Marcus like even keeled. Like, okay, hold on a second. Like, because if it was just them, they would just go balls to the wall, like make everything work. And it's like, wait, like, have you thought about this? There's been so many instances where I've pulled the reins back on Marcus. It's like, let's kind of slow down a little bit. And sometimes he can view that as me like just being completely unreasonable or I don't get it. I'm like, no, like I'm just trying to make sure we're not upside down. I'm just trying to protect our investment.
I was actually that way when it was Cozy Cactus. Like I was the one who wanted to like spend and invest and grow the business, and Brian was the one pulling the reins. So I was like, oh, maybe it's like when it's your idea and your business and you feel like you know what needs to be done to take it to the next level, I think maybe that's where the risk changes. So for me, obviously for the majority of our relationship, it's always been Brian's ideas and business and vision. And then when it was finally, my business and vision, I was like, oh yeah, like, yeah, let's spend on this. Let's do that. Like, let's do all these things. And
that
Brian was
sense.
like, whoa. And I was like, okay.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right about that. I think that we want to invest in ourselves and we want to try to make sure we get something off the ground. And you're right. I think when it's not your vision, it's a lot easier for you to be more balanced and kind of, or at least slightly unbiased about what's going on and trying to make sure that, things are super thought out and considered.
So I think this kind of brings us to the last point of where the money goes before it actually goes to you.
Yeah.
Which is savings. And, we've talked about reinvesting back in the business, but just like savings in general, like you said, to weather bad months, to refund customers. So this is something that like Brian and I have only been able to do recently this year. Like last year when you're starting out, like you're just trying to survive and make enough to cover your cost of living. Like now we're at the point where we can actually have savings. And I know that like, our goal is 6 months of operating expenses saved up. How do you guys go about, how much you have in your emergency fund and savings wise?
Man, initially it was really about like making sure we just had whatever money was in there, and we were very fluid with our money. So I like the idea of having a set amount in our accounts, like separated from our personal and our business. But in the beginning, we were so fluid, like everything just went back and forth. Yeah. We kept track of it in our spreadsheet, but we didn't have like a dedicated amount that we pushed to the side. We actually didn't start doing that until 2020, right? That's when like everything kind of was a shit show and we had to kind of plan for the unknown. And even though business is unknown, like the pandemic added another layer to that. So we were very diligent about setting aside a specific amount of money for our savings. And that threshold was usually between $10,000 and $20,000. Like, let's move this over, make sure we have this. Our personal expenses are taken care of, and then for all of 2020, we basically made sure that Mark's income, his work income from his full-time position paid the bills, and I had savings from previous positions and things, and we kind of left that untouched. But with the business, we made sure that we had a surplus coming in, and we really hit our stride in July of last year. Like that's when, when 2020 happened and we were locked down in March. From like April through June, I was really pouring over our margins and our numbers. And I kept telling Marcus, I was like, there's a new regime in town. Like, I'm not letting, certain things slip through the cracks anymore. And he's like, okay. But then he started seeing it and obviously he's like, wait, like how is our business account numbers are super high. I was like, yeah, I've been really diligent about trying to make sure our money stays there. So, for me, I think that businesses should probably try to have double digits if possible, like 10,000 at bare minimum, and kind of work on increasing that each month. But again, depending on where you are, if you're just starting out, man, unless you get access to capital or something, like it's super hard to just transfer your personal money over to your business and be like, that's it. Cause like when you're first starting out, you don't know how much things are going to cost. You have an idea and then boom, like that number starts going up really fast. And before you know it, all your savings that you put aside for your side hustle is gone. And you're not even launched yet.
Yeah. And it's like, you're lucky if in the first year that you can pay yourselves from the business, let alone actually have enough money left over to save for the business. So
exactly. And I always considered it reverse. So I always considered paying ourselves like our profit, essentially. I never considered paying ourselves as expenses, right? Which now I do. Yeah. But before, I'm like, whatever profit we have, that's our money, Yeah,
that's kind of where we're still at. Like, Brian and I don't have a set salary yet. We want to get to the point where we're making enough to where we can we'll be an expense. We'll be in a gusto and we'll get get that, regular paycheck, but we're not stable enough for that yet.
No, it's hard. You can't consider yourself an expense yet because you're like, I gotta get this to a place where, we're comfortable. We have a stride.
That being said, I was looking at the numbers and what we actually ended up paying ourselves last year. And I think it came out to if you split in half, Brian and I, each of us making a salary of around $80,000, which is really really good. It's not the salaries that we want to make. If you think about a C-suite in a small business, you're thinking six figures at the minimum. And I think we're making the same as our employee right now.
Right.
Just all right. And I feel really fortunate that, we knew from the get-go that our business had to support us and that we were going to be paying ourselves out from the get-go, versus Cozy Cactus, where we were just going to invest in that more. So I was wondering if you and Marcus, know how much you guys pay out, to yourselves.
Yeah, it's not a lot. We, as I mentioned before, we didn't start paying ourselves until October of 2020, which is kind of crazy. And again, we lived in that fluid space of shifting money back and forth and stuff like that. But, right now, I would say out of all of currently what we actually pay ourselves, because we have considered ourselves as an expense since we pay ourselves through Gusto now. Yeah. We're not even representing I don't even think we're representing 10%. We're probably 3 or 4% if that's even accurate of our annual earnings. This year, what we want to try to do is at least get to making sure we pay ourselves between $7,000 and $10,000 a month. Okay. So yeah, we think we can get there. We think we can get above that actually, but we're being conservative. Yeah. And then we want to have a nice little windfall. Our profit goal is anywhere between $150,000 and $200,000. So that would just be a bonus, or we don't plan to take it. We just plan to keep it there, knowing it's our business. But yeah, that's kind of the plan. We want to get between $7,000 and $10,000 a month, and then have that extra bonus at the end of the year, pay off our tax debts and all of that stuff whenever that comes. And be really profitable. My brother asked me last night, are you guys profitable? As actually we are, which is kind of crazy. It doesn't feel like it, but we go through the numbers and we are profitable, and it's kind of crazy to think about, but we don't feel it, right? Yeah. We don't feel that huge accomplishment because it's really hard for companies to be profitable in the first few years. But that's our goal now, is to really feel that profit and make sure that we feel comfortable and confident about what we have at the end of the year. So we're lucky. I think we're similar, you and I, Lauren and Brian, and we don't have super crazy expenses. Yeah. Our cars are paid off. we're trying to be responsible
Yeah.
and fiscally conservative when it comes to that, because again, business is topsy-turvy and we don't want to, live above our means essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think our largest expense is our house, and we had committed to that when I had a stable corporate job. So like, well,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
But I think this goes interestingly into perceptions of, how rich people think entrepreneurs are, because I feel like it's very much like you're either the struggling entrepreneur that has all the ideas and none of them ever work, or like you've made it, you're like Duck McScrooge in the millions of dollars, and I don't feel like there's as much of the in between when people think about it.
Yeah.
And actually, one of my favorite stories that I'm going to tell people is when you guys came over one night and we were just sitting around talking about these perceptions, and you were saying like, yeah, man, like my family thinks like we are so much more successful than we are, and I was like, I have the opposite problem. Like, my family thinks like we're not as successful as we are. Yeah, like we have both ends of the spectrum.
Yes.
We're both like we're in the middle somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, my family thinks, even though like I'm like we don't have like super nice things, right? Like we're comfortable, but we're like, we don't have like the fancy cars or anything that represents this monetary success, right? And yeah, my family will swear up and down like, oh, Bridget and Marcus, they got it. They did it. I'm like, no, we don't. No, we do not. We're working there. And it's been a long uphill battle. Like, I mean, even when we were both working full time, managing our money properly, I'm super generous when it comes to my family. So that has always been like a point of contention with me and my husband, like trying to figure out like, okay, we need to make sure you're not pulling planks from our house to give to other people. Like, you have to be more diligent about this. And that's been a tough learning lesson for me. But yes, and that's a part of the perception that my family has of me or us is my fault, right? I'll tell them I don't have it, and then magically I'll have it, right? Like, they ask enough and they just think I was trying to be maybe stingy or, whatever the case may be. Maybe they thought I was trying to set my boundaries and they didn't believe me. And I acknowledge that and take accountability for that. Like, I can't say or tell someone I don't have it and then come in last minute saving the day type of thing. So I'm like, okay, I definitely have to like manage those expectations. But yeah, I mean, also too, I think Marks and I, we work really hard to not encumber anybody else with our problems. So in the past, even when money was tight, we figured it out versus going to someone for help or that type of thing. So I think that also contributes to the perception of us having it.
Yeah.
But yeah, we, they're some of them are convinced that we are really rich and we're Duck McScrooge swimming in piles of money, and we are not. We are inching ourselves towards the middle, right? We're now really having a good understanding of the importance of compound interest and saving and making sure we put that first, right? Because when you're trying to survive, I mean, I used to get so irritated when I would read financial literacy books and they're like, save, as soon as you get your paycheck, save this amount. I'm like, dude, I have to pay this bill, or I have to, like, there's no such thing as instantly plopping 10% or 20%, however much they recommend that you save. It just didn't seem feasible to me. Now it's like, okay, I get what they were saying. Like, I understand the importance. But when you're in your 20s, you're like, man, I'm trying to make it to the next day.
Yeah.
And you got student loan debt and all these other debts. And it's like, I don't know what the hell they're talking about. Like, this is not possible. So yeah, we have navigated that a bit. And again, the big focus has been trying to make sure we live within our means and not try to go for the extra. It for me, I've learned it just, a lot of materialistic things, they have very little intrinsic value, and I prefer experiences and things like that versus, material things that represent money.
I was, reading something about a different like financial mindset where it's like you identify the areas of your spending that like actually means something to you, and then you just don't spend as much on those other areas. So like if you're really into fashion and like clothes are your thing, then it's like, okay, like put your money where you're gonna like that's gonna make you the happiest, but like don't get a fancy car if you don't care about cars. Like don't get a crazy house if you are fine with a smaller one. It's like if you like experiences, then it's like, okay, then put all your money in travel and experiences, but you know, don't put it in clothes, or like it's like really identifying the things that do bring you happiness. And if you're going to splurge in that area, not in the areas that you actually don't care as much about.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about finding that balance. And I think when you're young, you're trying to show that you have it all. You're trying to compete. You're trying to give off this illusion that you've made it. And
there's still plenty of people that do that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know in Scottsdale, they call them like the 30,000-aires. Like, yeah, have you not heard of that phrase? Like the 30,000-aires, they're driving like BMWs or Mercedes, but they make like 30 to 40,000 a year. Like they're not making a lot of money. They're living off of like credit card debt.
Okay. I had not heard that, but I can believe it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I had a rude awakening a few years ago. Like, cause another thing, I was always weary about credit, like having a lot of credit card debt, like that just being the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
And I was visiting a friend, you know, in California, and I just saw them have like all these things. Like they rented this car for the weekend. It's like a BMW and all of, I'm like, how the hell is this happening? And she's like, credit. I was like, oh. Well,
credit makes that happen.
Okay. Yeah. It's a whole different world.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. You have those department stores throwing credit card applications at you. You have everyone trying to give you some type of interest-bearing payment. Like, here, I'll rent this for you, but I'm going to collect all this money at the end. And I just was never comfortable living like that. So, I mean, it's crazy to me because you and Brian have always come off super stable, that your parents would think that you guys destitute.
Well, like, maybe destitute might be a little strong, but like, you know, it's always the surprised reaction from like, you know, parents, family members when we've, you know, made it to like the next level, like, you know, the little milestones as you're progressing in your business. And I mean, part of it, like, you know, you talked about it was like your fault with your family's perceptions and how, you know, you downplayed it. And that's what we do too. Like, I think that, you know, you and I and Marcus and Brian, we would prefer to downplay things than to play them up, obviously, as if we're, you know, doing better than we actually are. I think sometimes I especially go out of my way to try and like share the struggles and not so much the successes. And also it was just very new to like my family as well. And, you know, maybe hearing about like what we're working on, but like, oh, but you should like talk to this person about a job here.
Oh no. Right.
We're maybe at work and just like, I just for a while, I think maybe now it's a little bit different. I think it's because once you get further along in the stages, like I feel like they start to like, you know, realize, oh, okay, like they're doing okay. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. And it always comes from concern, right? They're like, they care about you and they want you guys to be successful. And that's really the motivation behind that. But yeah, I mean, we just shared yesterday on Facebook, at least, that, you know, after 3.5 years, we've crossed $1 million mark officially in terms of gross revenue. So we didn't do projections. It's everything that's been processed through Stripe and QuickBooks.
Damn.
And that was cool. And Marcus kind of shared it. He was very short and sweet. Like, he's like, you know, I'm not proud of a lot, but this is pretty huge that I was able to do this in 3 years, considering I was working part-time and working on this side hustle part-time. And now it's grossed $1 million. And I had a lengthier post,
That's
like
incredible.
You said. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, where I was just kind of like, let me keep it real. That $1 million is not in this house. Like we earned it, yes, but we are not millionaires, you know. And I think it's not to, I don't really try to downplay it like we didn't work hard for it, but I don't want people to think, one, we're being super boastful or showboating or anything like that. But two, you know, I was trying to just acknowledge my husband, and he had this kind of crazy idea of like this cleaning business, and it paid off, and he's worked so hard at it, and just super proud of him and what he's been able to do, being super proud to be a part of it. and really, hopefully letting people know that it is possible, right? You can also achieve this too. And, you know, almost like if we can do it, you guys can do it, because we ain't shit. I mean, I throw that out there a lot, but it's more of a joke. Like, we're not anything special, you know, type of thing. But yeah, I mean, I just try to, like you, I try to be, my goal is to be relatable, right? Like, not to be some abstract type of thing that I feel like we see a lot on social media specifically, that this is attainable and we're very real people, and shit's rough, you know?
You made me realize, I think one of the reasons that I shared the struggle too is I feel like I have gotten the like impression from people or society that like most entrepreneurs haven't earned it. Like, and I want to share the struggles so they know it's not a walk in the park. Like, we do have obstacles. There are lots of stressors, risks that we take, things that we work through. And yeah, it's like, obviously it's a blast for us to grow. And like, I want to share more of like the good stuff, but I feel like maybe it's just like my like internal insecurities, but I feel like in general, people like, they only see like the super successful ones. And yeah, there are cases where it's like they came from money and like maybe they didn't or have to work that hard. I mean, even so, like you still like, even if you inherit a business, I imagine you still have to do something, like hire the right people.
You have to put the work in.
Like, businesses can fall apart.
Or else you're going to in the wrong hands. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think I share the struggles and downplay a lot of it because I want people to believe that we earned it, that we did work hard, and that, you know, a lot of people just think you don't deserve the success sometimes.
Yeah, I woke up this morning, like, questioning if I should have made that post. It's crazy, right? Yesterday I felt inspired and I wanted to share this news. And then this morning I woke up like, was that tacky? You know, should I have not disclosed that we just grossed $1 million? But then I thought about, everyone shares their news. They share when they graduate or finish a program. They share that they are married. They share that they are or starting a family. You know, what makes this so different? And I think, quite honestly, it's this uncomfortable conversation we have around money.
Yeah.
And
100%.
You know, people feeling like they can't really be open or transparent about it. And again, like you said, we try to keep it real. Like, listen, we're not millionaires, right? We don't have $1 million sitting in the bank. But to say you started something from scratch and you earned or grossed $1 million in 3 years, I think that is something to really be proud of. But it's tough. I like that you touched on the perception that people don't know or think that entrepreneurs really work for their money. What were your initial, if you can recall, reactions to seeing entrepreneurs who've made it and like sharing that news before becoming an entrepreneur?
I didn't have much of an opinion about it, I think. I remember, I don't know why this memory has stuck in my head, but I remember when I was, you know, straight out of college, having my first internship. I was living with my aunt and uncle in San Francisco, and a couple of their friends came over, and like all of them are, you know, very, very successful. And I just remember this guy talking in like, I can't even remember the exact words or because I was like, you know, I was like half paying attention, half there, and like let the grown-ups talk. And he was like ranting about how he's like, I invested all my savings, like all my money, and I deserve, you know, all the success that I've gotten. And it was him saying how people don't realize like all the risks and sacrifices that he had made as an entrepreneur, and how like I gathered, like, you know, he's gotten a negative reception or perception of him and his success. And for some reason that memory stuck with me. So I think going into entrepreneurship, I guess that kind of formed my opinion about where this perception comes from. And, you know, you talk like in the news, there's, you know, all these like billionaires and millionaires, and like, you know, if Jeff Bezos donates, you know, $10 million, it's never enough, you know, it's right. like even doing something good, like, there's like so much other nuance, and I don't want to like jump into all that. But like when I see things like that, where, people are saying things like, oh, Jeff Bezos like provided value in the beginning of Amazon, but he doesn't do anything now. I'm just like,
right.
I'm like,
right,
oh my goodness.
Amazon.
But like, say he doesn't do anything now, like he was still running Amazon
right.
at the time, and like it's a huge company, and like there's like, come on, like he's doing nothing to provide value. So like,
right.
That was only like a year ago when I heard,
Yeah. People
comment.
are super jaded about him right now. Yeah.
So, and I know it's different.
But you're right.
But like, I think that it comes from also people feeling like, like if you're making that much money, you're taking advantage of someone else. Like someone has to be losing if you are winning that much. Like, and this, it gets so nuanced, and but I'm just trying to explain like where this viewpoint of mine comes from, and why I feel like that's the perception of entrepreneurs.
Yeah. It's funny. I don't think I've ever thought entrepreneurs didn't deserve it. I did feel like we're not getting the full story. Like, I think we've talked about that before.
Yeah.
I felt like they're not being transparent about how they got into like their capital or starting funds, or, the support that they had along the way. However, I never thought that they didn't earn it. For me, hearing those stories actually always inspired me. Like, oh my gosh, like if this person can do it, then I can do it too. Or, so I never felt like people didn't earn their keep. But yeah, I think other people, again, entrepreneurship is still this kind of unconventional path.
Yeah.
Despite how long it's been around. I mean, it's been around since before formal education. However, we've been conditioned to view it as unconventional. And I think couple that with the discomfort about talking about money openly, it definitely creates this interesting perception about entrepreneurs. So,
yeah, I never felt like entrepreneurs didn't earn it either. I mean, I'm sure there are, there's obviously cases out there of shady shit and unethical business practices, and some people are handed money and blah, blah, blah. But we're talking about, entrepreneurs like us, just bootstrapping, trying to build from scratch. And, it's a worry of mine that like there are people in my own family who like might think I'm evil, or, if, we become pretty successful, if we make a lot of money, how much money are you allowed to make, and how successful are you allowed to be? And I feel like entrepreneurs, I think sometimes they're idolized, but oftentimes I think they're villainized.
I totally agree with you, and I'm glad you touched on that threshold of success because I do think people can tolerate certain successes, right? Like, oh, you've made your first million, or oh, you've, sold your business or something like that. But if you become this version of success that almost makes you, to them, unrelatable now you are vilified. And I honestly think that speaks more to the person. Like, I think clearly there's something there that they're uncomfortable with acknowledging, whether that was their faith in you, or maybe seeing the success is challenging them in what they want or how to be successful. That's on them. I think you and I both agree that money does not equal success, right? So, it can be a metric, right, for some people, but I don't believe if I make X amount of dollars that that means I'm super successful. I often think about what I want to contribute to society, how I want to make a difference or impact versus how much money I have in my account. So, but yeah, I think you're right. I think there's this threshold of success that people can tolerate that you have in it. I'll be honest, like I expected a certain feedback from certain people about this accomplishment that Marks and I met, and I didn't get that. And, I have to deal with that on my own, but it's very interesting concept to think about. And
sorry,
I'm just like, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, You're so like calm and even when you're talking about this, and I'm like yelling into the mic.
No, I've come to terms with it because I definitely get it. We are like screaming like, hey, like I did something, we did something. Like how come it's not getting the same amount of praise as like if I was to have a baby? Or you know, I think things with families and school and stuff like that, like there's this commonality around it. So people are like, oh yeah, you're taking this next step, and they can be happy for that. But then something like money, it's like, oh.
Yeah, money is just one of those taboo things in society where it's just still, like you said, so uncomfortable to talk about. I like that you brought up like trying to be relatable on this journey. So, you know, hopefully people understand more. And I think, you know, we were talking about this with Thomas yesterday. I think a lot of the negative perceptions around, you know, entrepreneurs or CEOs comes from like poor business practices, like as far as like treating employees. And I feel like our generation and, you know, Gen Z coming up behind us, like there's starting to be a progressive shift towards businesses caring about philanthropy, about sustainability, caring about how they treat their employees, transparency. All these things I think will hopefully help shift people's views. It's like easy to villainize people if they're treating other people terribly. They're making all this money, but then they're treating people terribly. They're, you know, doing shady business practices, like all that stuff. I hope that's changing, you know.
Same. I hope it's changing too. And I think we're going to talk about this later, but I definitely feel this shift in progressive entrepreneurship, which is super exciting. One that really considers social change and being present and engaged with what's going on with current events and current affairs. So I think we are a more conscientious group of entrepreneurs. So that's super exciting. And I think that will help change the narrative around what it means to be an entrepreneur and what our success looks like. I wanted to just touch on this, and maybe we can end here.
Sure.
Is some of the things that we are surprised about when it comes to our finances and stuff like that. So
sure.
What were some of the things that surprised you, Lauren, kind of navigating through money and figuring out what we have to pay for?
Yeah, I mean, definitely it's the unexpected expenses. Like for me, it was like workers' comp insurance, unemployment taxes, liability insurance, like legal fees. I guess I kind of expected legal fees, but like some of those other ones, I'm just like, what?
I know.
And how much you should save for taxes. Like, so like when you hear those numbers, like, you know, save 30% of your money for taxes, it didn't really hit me until like, you know, we actually started making money and I was like, wait a minute, I got to put this much away right now. And like, only this much is coming to me.
Yes. The first year we didn't make a lot of money, right? Because technically our first year in business was 3 months, right? 2017.
Yeah.
So we didn't have the tax issues. But then that following year, we're like, uh-oh, what's going on here? Yeah. It's crazy because I think you could try to save enough, because that's what we tried to do. We thought we saved enough, and then we still found out that wasn't enough.
Oh.
And we're like,
damn. Yeah.
Okay. Missed that mark a little bit. Yeah. It's all right.
How about you guys? What were some of the surprises for you?
So, man, there are so many. But I think the surprise is really seeing how much you are willing to pay out to your employees versus yourself. Mm-hmm. And in your mind and even on paper, you've outlined what you're going to pay people for their work, and you think, oh, this is more than enough, or this is generous, or whatever. But then when you finally do the number crunching, like when you find that your staff or your workers are making up like 70% of your earnings, it's like, whoa, like they are taking home the bank. Like that really surprised me. And at first I'm like, oh yeah, like I still am. Let me make sure that's clear. I'm for a livable wage. I'm for fair wages. I'm for paying people what they deserve.
Yeah.
Straight up. And that's how we've always navigated our company. But yeah, when you see those numbers and how much you pay out, it's like, holy crap. Like last year we paid over almost close to $500,000 to staff and employees and workers. And it's like, wow, like, it's kind of cool, like thinking we're helping or knowing we're helping families or we're helping people earn money and stuff like that. But yeah, you see that number And it's like, for me, you're really realizing the impact that your business is having on the economy or in other people's lives. And that's kind of cool to see. But yeah, also with like you, the insurance costs, that is a lot of money. Just basic maintenance, like it's the little things that add up, right?
Yeah.
Like our software costs, like, oh, our software costs $199 a month. That's not bad. But then you have another software, then you have another software, and it just kind of builds, and you realize you do need these things. Like a lot of cleaning companies were managing their schedules like on spreadsheets and stuff like that. We're like, we're totally not doing that. So we're going to use the scheduling platform. But yeah, it definitely adds up. So I think the biggest surprise for me is that the math is very funny. It does not add up the way you think it does. But then you become really skilled. All of a sudden, like now you're becoming a math wizard because you want to know where your money is going and where it resides, and you want it to reside with you or as much possible.
Is it you or Marcus that's on top of the finances, or both?
Both. Marcus is more like day to day, like he's looking at it every single day. I will peer in, like when I'm running payroll and stuff and I'm looking at the numbers, I'll usually do a deep dive like once a week, get frustrated, and try to figure out or implement some changes to help that. As you know, I mentioned I started reading this book called Profit First, and it's already shifted my mind around how to approach our business finances. Like, I'll just give the basic concept right now. We all know that technically profit is sales minus expenses. This book is teaching people how to reverse that, and basically sales minus profit equals expenses. So it's really about putting your profit first and then cutting back on your expenses and really forcing you to operate lean so you can be a profitable business. Seems simple, but because we are programmed to do things the way it's always been done, a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with, adopting this new mindset. So I'm super excited. Like, I want profit. I want money. So if something can kind of help me get there, I'm all for it. So I'm halfway through the book. I hope to finish it by early next week, but I will update you, Lauren, on the findings and implementation and all of that. Our accountant has been pushing us to go profit first. She's a profit first certified accountant. So nice. I'm really excited about it.
So the thing that I asked Brian, like what he was surprised about, he was like, I was surprised at how little it costs to start up a service-based business. We're over here like talking about how we're surprised at all these unexpected expenses. And Brian's like, oh, like.
He is so funny. I'm about to start another one.
Yeah, for real. Like, I was like, what the? And that's just how Brian's mind works. He's got such an abundance mindset. Like, it's insane.
So funny because like you were totally expecting a different answer.
Yes,
like,
I was.
More tangible. Like, yeah, man, I didn't know it would cost this much for this. And you're like, he's like, I didn't know it'd be this little.
I was just like
wait, what? Like,
yeah, exactly. And he's like, yeah, you don't have to save up like hundreds of thousands of dollars, like for like a product business and to worry about inventory or like office space and stuff. Like I've said it, I've talked about it earlier, like our employee is like 75% of our operating expenses. Like it is easily the biggest chunk of our expenses. So it's like, okay, well, like, yeah, I guess.
Yeah. But still, yeah. Dude, I feel like the first few years of business, a lot of entrepreneurs feel that way. And it's funny because it's like when you come across like a worker that has a complaint, you're like, what? What's going on here? Like, but you have to be open-minded and stuff. But yeah, I'm like, wait, man, we're treating you good over here, okay? Like, you're getting this money. But it's obviously more than that, right? It's the culture, it's the learning environment, it's so many things. But yeah, I mean, when they represent a bulk of it, it sticks. You're like,
oh, yeah. And then you got to save up for it. I didn't even talk about like how we, made the mistake of hiring someone. We didn't have any savings to offset like the month or two of like training before they would be like ramped up and ready to go and start working so they could take off the load. So like, we were like, oh shit, like there goes our bank going down. And I was like, oh, we need to save more for the next time we want to hire someone, because obviously like it took away from doing sales time for Brian because we had to train, and that person like wasn't ready to take on work. And so it was like, oh, wow, we didn't budget for before having money when we hired some. So
yeah, that's intense. It's very real though. So yeah. Now
we know better.
Yeah. We've learned a lot, okay? And we will still continue to learn because we're just getting started crazy enough. So,
yeah.
Well, I'm pretty sure that we're going to come back to this series. I mean, there's so much talk around money, and I think both Lauren and I, respectively, in our businesses are reaching new milestones with regard to our revenue and sales, and that's super exciting. So we're definitely going to come back and revisit more money talk. And I think there's so much more to touch on. We're seeing this impact with like the economy, like not having enough accessible workers, and there's so much going on right now. Yeah. But best believe we still will be touching on money throughout our future episodes. We hope you guys have been able to glean a little something.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Until next time, guys.
Yeah, like, subscribe, share, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or YouTube. And yeah.
All the places, all the things.
Have a good one.
Thanks, Lauren.